I moved this up until, well, 2 p.m. Central Time just to get a little more uh, real-time HGSI action in to show you a little more of that. And I don't know if you like this time or not. It works fine for me, and if it works fine for you, I may do this in the future. So we'll find out. Anyway, let me pop this up here quick. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. I'm not going to read it. Standard risk disclaimer, I'm not recommending any stocks. This is for educational purposes only, and the education is really about HGS Investor and the way I do things, and the way that people in our group on the Skype group do things, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So anyway, you're responsible for your own profits and losses and actions. I just show you different techniques, and hopefully we'll all make some money using this technique or these techniques. Now the reason I have the ETFs up here is because one of the customers said that he has taken a full-time job and he just is able to trade ETFs now, and he asked me the difference between using VPA and volume point of control or volume at price with ETFs or stocks, and there's really no difference. I mean, everything, all the concepts work the same way. Now, what I've got here is I'm using my quick start folder, and I'm using the scorecard ETFs intraday, and I am in my market analysis user groups in major markets ETF number 2. And I won't be here very long, but I just want to point out that this is a really easy way to get a view of what's happening in the market. There's 35 ETFs in here, and it's just a good snapshot. And I mentioned a few minutes ago that home construction stocks are on top, then consumer staples, transportation, and then several small cap groups. Here's biotech, here's healthcare, and so on. This combo rank is the intraday percentage price change one day. So when you sort on this column, the groups that have the ETFs that have the greatest appreciation one day go to the top, and the worst ones go to the bottom. Now I'm just going to scroll over to the right on this view, and you can see that all of the VPA information is here, and the volume point of control, the 1010 information is here. Now, as most of you know, I use the 1010, and I'll explain that here in a minute when I bring a chart up, as a trigger to potentially get into a stock. It doesn't necessarily stock or an ETF. It doesn't necessarily mean that I will. But you can see this column right here. It's the days since the VPOC 1010. And you can look back over here. I'm looking at home construction shares. It says 6 days ago or 7 days ago there was a no supply, which indicated strength. And even before that there was a volume point of control crossover on this particular ETF. So if I bring this chart up, that is going to correspond, I'll put my crosshair on here, with this green, it was green and then it went to rose for one day on this shakeout, and then it went back to green on this day, and housing, the housing ETF or the home construction ETF has not turned negative. Yes, it did pull back here, but when it pulled back, as I put my crosshair on here, notice this candle is a black candle, but the volume was very light. The next day it was another black candle, and the volume was also Well, it was below the 50-day moving average volume. It didn't penetrate that. It was heavier than the prior day, but if you look back here, it was not nearly as well. It wasn't as high as the volume to the upside, so it wasn't enough to trigger to the downside. Now, as I have explained this before, I'm using the 10-10, which means, by the way, this is a chart that I put in. This is a chart I had last week, the volume point of control. This one is 7A, has the buckets in it. Now, the buckets encompass the last 10-day period. So if I were to count backwards from here, it would be 10 days. And where the brown line is, the brown line represents, this right here, represents the 10-period volume point of control. Now, here is where it turned positive, and you can follow it up. And I also have it in this view as a horizontal line. And the reason I have all three of these in here now, it shows us different levels of support based upon different time frames. So this is 10 days. If you look up here, here's a guide. 22 days is red, and 44 days is blue. So if I were to change to one of these others, and I may do that, it tells me where the volume point of control for that time period is. Now, I discussed this with Matt the other day to get some clarification on some questions I had, because sometimes this line is all over the place, and a lot of that you can attribute to the short time frame. Like, you know, it's jumpy here, but that's just something we have to live with if we want to potentially use this as an entry point. And I think its value really outweighs everything else. But with these three lines here, we can see where there is congestion or support over different time periods. I'm going to hit my alternate 2 key here on my keyboard. You can see that housing or home construction has really been in a free fall here. It bounced around, and what I'm seeing though is I'm seeing a lot of support in here based upon both the 44 days or 2 months of trading and also the 22 period, which is 1 month of trading, and then the 10 period. I'm going to zoom back into this and take a close look at this. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So what does this represent? Every time a stock, every day stock, 99.99% of the time is going to either close higher or lower than the prior day. Rarely do you see a stock price close exactly the same. So when a stock or an ETF moves up, any period, any of these buckets, I should say, that this candle touches, and I'm going to use this white candle right here, volume is assigned to all three of these buckets. And Matt, I thought maybe it was distributed among the buckets, but the same amount goes into all buckets that are touched, because there's really no way to break it out during the day. We're using a daily data. So, for example, this, even though this closed, this wick went up into this one and closed below this bucket gets the same amount of volume as this bucket and this bucket. So on a day where it encompasses many buckets, each one of these buckets receives the same amount of volume. Same thing here. Now on a day when there is really heavy volume, and let me back up here. if you look at this here, here's a volume spike. This wick on this candle does not go below this bucket. This bucket represents the high and the low point of the candles, including the wicks over that 10-day period. Now, I don't want to get too technical on this, but I think, this is something that you should probably know. So on this day, with the stopping volume and the heavy volume relative to the other volume, this wick, even though the body is up here, notice that there is a bucket here, and that all of that volume comes because this white candle encompassed this area. So the volume right here, let's see if I can get the right amount here. Okay, I don't think I have the amount there, but anyway, all of this volume from this volume bar was assigned to all three of these buckets, and because the volume was so heavy, this green bucket extends out here. So the volume point of control on that day was where this brown horizontal line is, and also this brown line here. So this reversal, because it was on such strong volume, created all of those buckets, and that was the beginning of a move up here for 4 days, and then here was a down day. And the reason we had this, this obviously closed lower than the prior day, so all of this volume here was assigned, and I need to back up here, was assigned to this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, and this bucket. That's where the rose comes in, because it crossed all of those areas. And then the next day, because this one closed higher and this white candle encompassed all of these buckets, the green buckets received the volume from this day. Now, I'm sure you're thoroughly confused by now, but it's really actually quite logical when you think about it, because when these bars are going up and they encompass a lot of buckets and volume is fairly heavy, it tells us that there is a lot of buying pressure. Conversely, when it goes down and there are a lot of red buckets, it tells us there's a lot of selling pressure over the past 10 days. Okay, now I'm just going to leave it at that in case you have any questions. But we're going to look at these volume points of control and volume at price as I go through and do some prospecting. Now, getting back to this, if this is green and the percentage close, the volume point of control 1010, that means it's positive, it's above the bucket. If it's red, or it's above the line, if it's red, it's below the line, and this tells you the number of days ago that it occurred. Let's just look at this one before I go. This is 26 days, which is actually 27 days. Remember, small caps have been extremely powerful, and you can see that that would be 27 days ago right down here. Now let's open this up a little bit. You can see that it was going down. It was chopping us in here. Here was a reversal bar. It was strong enough to generate the 1010. In other words, the candle went over the brown line, hesitated for a couple of days, but the close remained above the brown line, and that's all we're concerned about with the end of the day, and that was the beginning of this move up in the small caps. Now I'm going to bring this up here. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to move over to here, and if we look down here, that's an 8% gain in this ETF over 27 periods. So obviously a good call for those of us who primarily trade stocks. 8% doesn't sound like that big a gain actually over that time period. So I primarily stick to stocks. Occasionally I'll trade some ETFs and so on. And if I do, I'd prefer to do it with debit and credit spreads where you can actually get a lot more leverage based upon a price movement. Okay, let's move on. As I said, I'm going to go to all securities. I'm going to hit my alternate key and spacebar at the same time. That is a shortcut to take you to all securities. And then I'm going to concentrate primarily on the quick start views, and we're going to be talking about intraday, but also I want to show you, well, let me do the intraday here. If you update your basic add-on, what I did, so a lot of people like to use these VPA flags, and I do too, and I was searching them out and so on, and you really don't need to do that because I've moved these up here where they're more accessible. Now, a lot of people like to use this number 4. It's bullish, an up bar closing near the high, and you can see that information is all right here. And if I'm doing this intraday, what this does, it's really a 2-day signal. Here's a signal here, here's a signal here, and then, well, here, this was a 2-day signal right here. This is today. Now, this is a little cheap stock, $2.60 approximately, or $2.55, but you can see that these calls were actually good, and today there is a volume point of control. Now, I'm not going to be buying this stock, obviously, but I'm just pointing out that these screens do work. Now, look at all this up here. This is a 10-period a volume point of control that's been negative. It just turned green today. All of these buckets are rows only. Why? Because every day was down. Every close was lower until we got right here. And that's when we started building some green buckets over here. Probably not a great example. Let me see if I can. Here's Winnebago. Let's look at this today. Okay, here is your 2-day signal from this particular view. It's number 4, VPA bullish, up bar closing near the high, which was this candle right here. So this is a confirmation of the prior day's VPA flag, which strength seen returning after a downtrend. Here's confirmation, and it continued to go today. Now notice all the green buckets. The crossover was back here on this day. You can see it going above the brown line, and then it hesitated, and notice that the volume is building as we're going forward, especially on these 2 days here. That shows that there's demand, and then when you look at the candle at the same time, it really shows you that there is demand here, especially on this one because it closed near the high of the day, and this one closed in the upper range, and this also, well, no, it got clear up to here today. This builds during the day. I'm running, of course, Thinkorswim and using essentially real-time quotes, so you can see that Winnebago moved up nicely. Now, I did not put the group line in here because I thought there was enough going on. So what I do is I just flip up to chart number 6, and it's got the group line in it, and you can see that this group has been going up. I prefer to see the groups going up when a stock is going up. I also have the pocket pivots in this chart in addition to the volume point of control. So if you have your quick pick on, it's easy just to go to that view, or go back to this view, or go to this view if you just want the lines on the volume point of control. So who's in control of this stock right now? Well, obviously the bulls are, based upon the 10 period. If I go to this other volume point of control, you can see that the brown line, the 10 period, the red line, which is the 2-month period, and the blue line, the blue line is 2 months and the red line is 1 month. You can see that there was a lot of support in this area, even though this has been bouncing around. So when you see things, areas like this, and let me zoom out, you can see that Winnebago, which not that many months ago was a leading stock, sold off, but there was a lot of accumulation in this stock, and that gives you an opportunity to put a stock in your watch list and hopefully watch it break out. And it looks like it's breaking past all of this resistance back to this point. Right now, volume is not complete yet, but if you look over here at this box, or I'm sorry, yes, I did mean the box, the warehouse view part of the chart, it shows that volume's running 59.4% above the 50-day moving average, and you can see that right here. So this is confirming today that there is demand, just like it confirmed the past 2 days. So if you scan on these stocks using the scans that I'm going to show you in a minute, you're going to find these stocks. They're going to come up every day. And a stock really cannot go higher or lower without a signal one way or the other in the volume point of control. Evidently, Paul wants me to look at HSY. Okay, now here is one that is firing today. And here's a test, and here's a confirmation of that test. Stock's in a pretty good downtrend, but after the low volume test, notice the low volume, there was higher volume yesterday, and that confirmed that test. That's one of the things we're looking for. Now, I don't like all this resistance over here, but I do like the support in this area. Okay. I think this chart is very valuable for giving us not only triggers, but for giving us a clue of demand and supply, support and resistance. Okay, let's look at PG. Yeah, PG, you can see it's accumulating here. It's starting to move. This is strength seen returning after a downtrend, and this is a confirmation of that strength the following day, and this was an effort to rise. And let me bring up the quick pick. I'm going to go to number 6. Is this, yeah, here's the group line. It's hard to see, but the group started moving up, and this would have shown up in the intraday and the end of day group movement both. We also have a pocket pivot on this today. Notice the multiple days of accumulation here. Let me drop back down here. I'm updating as we go. That's why there's a drag at some point. It's not much of a drag. Now I'm going to, here is, let's take a look at the 44-day, and evidently the brown line is overlapping the 22-day. I'm going to edit the indicator, go to the 44 trading days, going to turn these on, and this shows us the range of these candles over the 44-day period. Now the highest point is clear up here, and that represents this candle, because this candle is still within the range of the longest bucket when you locate the longest bucket, you'll also find the volume point of control for that time period. So over this time period, these 44 days, this stock was under accumulation. Yeah, it got out here. Here's the lowest point here, which is equivalent to this bucket. Okay, and that's what this represents, the range. But most of the volume over this time period was trading at this volume point of control. This was an extreme. Actually, this was an extreme up here too. And now we're moving. But most of the volume is, if you look at this, when you see these lines, or if you put the buckets on here, this line represents in the buckets where most of the volume has been trading for a particular stock. All right. Let's just leave it on here for a minute. I want to go up here and talk about some of these other views that I use for screening. I'm just going to close this and I'm going to the quick start under stock prospecting, and we're going to primarily talk about these next few views. Any questions on that? Does it make sense to you where the most volume is traded? That is your volume point of control based upon the number of periods you choose and the range of the stock prices. So it's a good visual to see the extremes and also where the action is. And when you get those tight ranges, that means generally that there is an agreement upon price, and hopefully you'll be aware of a stock when it starts to move. Okay, let's take a look at this view right here. I don't know if I covered this last week or not. I think I did, but if I didn't, that's fine. This is the bullish 10-period volume point of control with a 3-day window. So what does that mean? It means that there is a bullish crossover within the last 3 days using the data from last week or yesterday and the prior 2 days. It doesn't take into account today. You could do a full update of your database. Well, I could do that right now and get current data here, but that would take me 5 minutes because of my data, and I don't really want to do that right now. But this column represents the prior 3 days. So a 0 indicates that there was a flag yesterday, and there was also a VPA signal, and this is Beazer Homes, BZH. Now, what I like about this view, and let me go in and do one more thing here. I'm going to go to my industries, and I'm going to, you've seen me do this if you've been sitting in, because all of the stock prices are updated every 5 minutes for me in Thinkorswim. I can build these indexes and get an up-to-date view of what's happening in the market based upon the index price movement. It doesn't really take very long at all to do this if you have a fairly fast computer. Almost done. I should have closed the warehouse. It would have gone a little faster. Okay, we're done. Now, I'm not going to stick in industries right now. I'm going to go back to all securities, click through to that warehouse view, go up to the top, make sure my filter is reapplied, and look what happened here. I'm sorted on my combo is the industry percentage price change 1 day. I know this data is current. What did we see in the ETFs? We saw that home builders were the top group, and what do we find here? We find in the group that home builders are the strongest group. That industry just happens to be up 2.96%. today. Here's AVI Homes, here's Beezer Homes, there's DR Horton, and Tri-Point Homes. There's 3 of them that have passed this open window during the past 3 days, not counting today. Now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do a multiple sort. Don't let this confuse you. It's really simple. What's my sort here? My sort is industry percentage price change 1 day. So I'm going to sort on that manually over here. So the arrow is up. It may be hard for you to see, but it is. Then I'm going to do a secondary sort. And I'm going to actually, I did that wrong. I'm going to go up here to my combos. Let me do that again. I sorted here. I'm going to go up to my combos. Here's industry percentage price change 1 day. I'm going to drop down to strong momentum, effort versus result. This is my intraday combo. It breaks out the weighting between the volume, the price change, and the range at 33% apiece on the intraday fields. Now I am still sorted by industry percentage price change, but I'm going to do a secondary sort on raw combo. So I click on the search bar, type raw, select raw combo rank, and just watch over here. You'll probably see some movement, and AV Homes moved down from number 1 to number 3, and the reason that happened is that Tri-Point Homes fits the combo best. It's equally divided across the percentage price change 1 day, the range, and the volume. So you can see that Tri-Point Homes is trading above average volume today. That's a 20. I should probably change that to a 50, but it's not that big a deal. And it's in the upper part of its range, and it's up 2.86%. So if I bring this up, you can see that on the longer term view here, and let me get this, well, I'll talk about this a little bit. See, it was choppy and red over here, and then as it started to reverse here, we see a lot more green building because these candles are predominantly white, and every time it goes up, the volume from each of these candles is spread into these buckets. So the green buckets started to dominate as they were moving up, and then we had some down days on the candles. So this information went into the red portion of the buckets. This one right here, this close is actually higher than this close, so that would have been a positive day for volume. This would have been a negative day, which built upon these bars or buckets right here. But it's predominantly green, so it is bullish right now. Now I'm going to get rid of this. I'll leave this. Let me just go to the 7A chart, and we'll look at the 10-day. Now you can see that these buckets are predominantly green because the distribution of these up candles has been in these green buckets. Now look at this heavy volume down here. Very positive, distributed throughout these green buckets. This one here was a negative day. It crossed here, or this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, and it got into this bucket. So this volume, which was pretty heavy, was distributed over here, and that's why these are rose-colored. But today we got a reversal as the group started going up. So you can see that what happened here, and this, you have to look at these closely sometimes. See where this candle, the brown barely sticks up against the close, and that gave us one of these, but it's a white candle. That would not scare me out of this stock if I had gotten into it back here where it remained green, because it closed in the upper part of its range. And just because of the 10 period buckets, it was enough to dip this down and turn this rose. So you really need to analyze each candle very carefully to make sure that you don't blindly follow the lead on the signal to the downside. So what happened here? It pulled back, and today we got a test, and this stock is doing very well on heavy volume. So in this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, and this bucket, these all received volume assigned to them, and the volume point of control is now down here below. So housing over the last several days, it's actually looked pretty good. And here's your trigger. Here's actually the trigger back here. Then here's this slight pullback. But like I said, you need to be careful about that. You can't blindly follow this. But here was a fresh signal on this day which would have gotten you into this stock had you taken the signal. Let's look at one more DR Horton in this group. Come on. Same thing, except this one was more of a price rejection here. Now that would have scared me a little bit more, but here's a VPA signal or a flag to offset that, and it says no supply. Why is this no supply? Because the volume was so light on this that it's giving us a VPA flag. So like I said, you really need to look careful at these and use a judgment call. Use your discipline where you're going to get out. Now this one, it would have been a little scary the following morning because it opened here, traded down here, and then closed higher. This is another subject. We were talking about it on the Skype board a little bit today. Stops, what do you do with them? You need to have discipline, but boy, you can get shaken out a lot. What I like to do is I will use stops, especially if I'm away from the computer, but I like to put alerts in and then see how a stock reacts after it comes down and hits my stop point. If it keeps going and if volume is picking up, and you can look over here at the chart and see if the volume is running ahead of normal, then I'll usually pull the plug on it. I try to wait until closer to the end of the day, though, to make that decision. It's a no-win situation because there's really no right answer on stops. Sometimes you're going to take a beating, and other times you're going to really make up for it. So it's a judgment call. Anyway, these home builders are in a group that is up to date. This is all sorted for you automatically when you do the rebuild the indexes, so you can see where the action is. Trucking has been very good. Educational services has been good. And remember, with the secondary sort, the stocks that are most in demand are going to be at the top of the list. Stocks most in demand based upon effort result today. This is a one-day intraday indicator. So let's just look at this trucking stock here. Here is your flag yesterday. Down several days. I mean, here's your crossover on this candle, which closed near the top of its range, and it's following through today. Now, if I go to view number 6, remember I just rebuilt these groups. And when you rebuild these groups, this line is current. So I noticed the trucking stocks going up yesterday. I didn't buy anything in it. I wish I would have, but I didn't. But you look at this candle here, you can see here's an indecisive day. Here's another indecisive day, but this wick tells you that there was buying pressure the day before, and there was a pocket pivot on this day back here. So there's a few things to look at, but notice what I really talk about is I'm only talking about a price and volume and support and resistance. Everything's pretty much related to price and volume. And you just start looking for these things. I certainly miss a lot of trades. But I'm getting better at it. It's just a matter of practice, and that's what you have to do too. Because if you're disciplined, you can really find some winning stocks. Now here's a stock that I was in, and I got tired of holding it. I actually had a debit spread on it. I lost a little bit of money, very little. But I just got tired of holding it, and you can see that there's an awful lot of green here. Most of this green comes from this candle right here because of this extremely heavy volume. This was on earnings, and all of these buckets were created from this candle here. But over the past few days, I noticed that it was gaining support, and I almost bought it again yesterday, but I did not, and I probably should have, but I'm a little bit leery of this resistance up here where this bucket is. If it gets past here on some decent volume, I may just go ahead and go for it again. Why did this stock do this? Look at this earnings increase for last quarter, 231.8%, well above expectations. So right now I'm tying the fundamentals in to the technicals, and that's what HGSI is really great at. It gives us both the technicals, or the ability to analyze the technicals, and the fundamentals. By the way, I mentioned it last week. I essentially use two programs. I use Thinkorswim and HGSI. Occasionally I'll use EdgeRater, but with the addition of Thinkorswim, essentially real-time quotes to HGSI, I don't need anything else. Yeah, you can get cheaper commissions somewhere, some places. But yeah, that makes absolutely no sense to me, because how many times have you just let slippage eat away at your profits? If you're so worried about a dollar commission or something, that's nothing when you're trading stocks. I give profits back, and but I'm following this discipline. But I just don't think the commissions are a factor, even if you pay a few dollars more. Back when I started, I was paying, I've mentioned this before, going through a broker, you'd pay $45 to $95 per side of the entry and the exit. So you were way behind the eight ball before you ever got anywhere. Anyway, I don't want to get stuck on that. And these are all the groups that are up today as of recently. Look at this. So there's 660 securities. That's a lot of stocks, even if you just look at the top ones. If you go down to the number 11 view, these require that there be a fan up. Same filter, but I made a requirement of a fan being up. That cuts it down to 214 stocks, and there's only one home builder that has a fan formation. And I'm going to go back to my view number 6, and you can see that the fan is in place. The 200, the 100, the 50, and the 18. This is really the strongest stock, and it's a loosey-goosey stock. I will admit that. It's the strongest stock in the group because it's really the only one with a fan in place. But if I go back to this other view, this gives me opportunities to look at other stocks whose fans have not yet formed. And if I really want to see what's happening in the home builders, I change to the industry group, and I'll just go up here and look at scorecard intraday, and this gives me all of the stocks in that group. And maybe I can find something here. Now what goes to the top? Century Communications. I'm on the same combo. It's up 4.84% today. I can look over here. The short-term VPA trend is up, the others are down. It tells me this is probably a beaten down stock. And you can see that this fan is not in place, but there is a signal today, and there is also an effort to rise. Now, I like to look backwards. Tom Williams, who was the Trade Guider founder, he passed away last year, but he always said to look to the left when you're analyzing a stock. You want to see what's over here. There's resistance over here. So if I'm looking at that stock or looking at, okay, now these are two other stocks. There's two other stocks. You look over here at the EMA fan. They're in a fan uptrend, which did not have that VPOC crossover the past 3 days. That's why they're showing up here. This is why I like to go down to this level. So let's look at this. And let's go. I'm in the correct view already. You can see that this fan is in place. These home building stocks will drive you absolutely crazy. That's why you generally take short-term profits in them. But now as I look to the left on Pulte Group, this has cleared all this resistance over here. So that's why you look to the left. Here's the Vpa flag clear back here. Then it dipped down and then it took off again. Here is a pocket pivot. This is the fourth day in a row of pocket pivots. And, you know, these home builders have been showing up. Let's look at this one. Okay, this is the one I looked at already, I believe, TriPoint Homes. If you go up here, you can see that it's cleared resistance, a stronger stock. And let's do one more. Now this one, even though the fan is in place, you can see that there's going to be some resistance over here on this one. You don't even bother looking at that stock, or I don't. So let's get back to where I was. Notice that this is ghosted now. I can't go back. So what do? I hit my alternate spacebar keys. At the same time, it's taking me back to all securities, and then I'll just reapply this view with the fan up. I'm not going to go through all these charts. There's one educational service, TAL Education, I believe, that has a fan in place. Trucking, there's three. Here's ArcBest, the one we already looked at. There's three more. There's one rail freight, Norfolk Southern, that crossed over 2 days ago. And there was a high volume up bar closing at the high that day. Let's look at that chart. Here's your crossover. Here's your VPA flag, high volume up bar, and this stock is following through. You can see that the group is going up also, and there was a pocket pivot that day. So all kinds of opportunities come up when you start screening this way. Okay, somebody tried to turn their video camera on. Okay, so now if you want to look for bearish flags, you just click on these. I'm not going to spend time on the bearish right now, but it works the same way. Except I have a different combo here. This is the industry percentage price change down one day. It's still sorted on up. So if you're using the bearish, you have to click on the raw combo, and you can see that oil and gas services is down 2.05 today. That's all right, Fong. Don't worry about it. And look at this. Semiconductor manufacturing's down. Exploration and production's down. A lot of oil stocks are down. Casino and gaming stocks are down. Marine shipping is down today too. Not too much, but this just gives you a quick read of where the bearish stocks are, which have also had a negative volume point of control to the downside. So you can just flip back and forth. Bullish, now I'm strictly sorted on the raw combo. Home builders come back up. Bearish gives me this. These are the ones with the fan down. This column will light up green. 116 of these stocks. So here is, let's look at Tower Semiconductor. That's a name I used to be familiar with. And you can see that this stock is clearly in a downtrend based upon the fan. And here was, it turned negative on this day, which was yesterday. I'll zoom in on this. And it followed through today, but now we're starting to see some a low volume test. Volume's extremely low today. If you look down here, you look over here too, the intraday volume compared to the 50-day moving average is a minus 74%. So not a lot of selling pressure on this. But once again, we look to the left. Here it was making a move up. You're going to have sellers above here, more than likely. So you don't jump into a stock like this just because you see a low volume test. And also look at the group line. This group line really tells us a lot about what's happening with these stocks. Okay, marine shipping. I don't think I'll spend any more time on this view or these views, but I do want to go to number 14. Now, people like to look for IPOs. And I don't blame you because, you know, some of them really move. Now, when you apply number 14 in all securities using Thinkorswim, you're going to get some blank areas here. That just means that Thinkorswim is not providing quotes, or Thinkorswim has a different symbol for these. So you just, you know, you can't look at these during the day, but you can look at all these other ones here. Now look at this one. Here is Stitch Fix that had a 2 days ago or 3 days ago, it crossed over on the volume point of control, and it's up nearly 30% today. And look at that. We talked about this earlier in the Skype room, and I can't remember where it's trading, somewhere in here, I think, and it's continued to go up. Here's your volume point of control. We don't have any VPA flags in most of these IPOs, but in this one we do because it's traded 120 days minimum. And you can see where the VPA flags start to appear. And here was your crossover. Here is a huge volume day, trading 1,837.4% above the 50-day moving average. When I talked about it earlier in the Skype room, it looks like I should have bought this stock. But, I mean, look at it. It's at 99.8% of its daily range. There's got to be some news on it. I'm going to hit my alternate N key. I'm connected with bar chart right now, but you can connect with others. Let's see if any news comes. Strong earnings, active clients hit 2 million. So where's this showing up? Yeah, it's showing up in the news, but it's also showing up in the price and volume. This is where the clues come from. Do you think maybe there was some anticipation back here? And a confirmation on this bar yesterday that some news may be coming out on this. I can't say, but I suspect that there was some information that could have been leaked a little bit early, and here is the day where it happens, and it's a massive day. Let's look at Q. This one crossed over yesterday. See, no VPA flags here. whatsoever because it started trading here. We don't have 120 days worth of data, but here's a pocket pivot. Here's a shakeout day. Here's another volume pointed control signal right down here, and this stock is actually setting up quite nicely. You can see that it's a biotech. Very little information about it though. You can click over here and get some information, but you'd really need to go do a little more research. But I like the way this stock is setting up. Now, I know that Paul's not going to trade this stock because it's a biotech. And I'm just looking at the accumulation here, and I'm looking at the group. Now let's go back to the 1010. I'll go in here, and you can see that it's mostly predominantly green in this area right here, because the volume bars, when they cross these buckets, if there's heavier volume, you're going to get more volume assigned to those buckets. This one, if you trade biotechs, you can certainly put it in your list. You can see volume is trading well above normal. And I don't know. I kind of like it. Doesn't mean I'm going to trade it though. Here's another one that crossed over on this day. It hasn't done anything since. But if you're looking to screen biotechs, this is where you want to, I'm not biotechs, IPOs, this is where you want to come, because it will give you the VPOC signals and a 3-day window. Now, I'm not going to do this. I was going to say you can go look at all of the IPOs and see how long they have been trading. Well, I'll show you how to do this very quickly. Under the smart groups, under the HGSI starters, popular stock categories, there are new issues, IPOs here. If I go to that, you can see that I'm up there right now. If I take the filter off, hold the shift key, this gives me all the IPOs in the last 6 months, 318 of them. And then you can see the days since the VPOC crossover. Here is one, Rhythm Pharmaceuticals, that crossed over 43 days ago. Let's just look at this stock. So this IPO crossed over clear back here at 20 bucks. It's trading for about 33 right now. Nice run, nice unbroken run here. So my point is, if you screen for these daily, there will be a 3-day window there, and you can possibly find some of these before they start moving. Let's look at the next one. Now look at all this green here. Boy, this is nice. Here's your original 3-day window here. A little pullback. Here's another one right here. Look at this volume coming in right here. And look how green this is over here now, because is this Gil's favorite stock? Okay. Yeah, I think you mentioned that. But look at the closes on this and the white bars, and you can see how it I'm going to go back to here. Okay, right here you can see that the greens were predominant. And as I go here, as this moves up, all this volume here was assigned to the green. And this stock just kept pretty much going up. So look at those 3-day windows on the IPOs if you're interested in trading IPOs. And there's no reason not to look at them. Okay. Now, I want to go back to all securities. I'm out of this IPO folder. I'm going to hit my alternate spacebar. and the market just closed. So, what else did I want to talk about here? Let me check my list. I've got a printed list here. I hope you like the volume point of control, volume at price, and VPA, because it's a powerful combination. And then when you tie it in with Thinkorswim, there are plenty of opportunities. Okay, let me show you something else here that I added a while back. There's always a question on. Let me check my notes here. I want to go to stock. I need to go to. I want to go down here to my user groups, to my market analysis, major markets plus, and I want to bring up a chart, and I don't want this chart. I do want to let me see if I can find this. Okay, there's been a lot of confusion over the years about Ian's multiple indicator chart and when Eureka's fire. The problem has been that with this chart right up here, this chart has been set up for the NASDAQ. And let me go to the NASDAQ. Why can't I see it? Because there it is right there. So you can see that there is no Eureka here. So what I did is I set up a multiple indicator chart under the Quick Styles end of day charts for Ian's multiple indicator NYSE composite, which uses the NYSE data. And you can see that it turned green here. So this is a chart that you need to check if you're using the NYSE composite. Now, it doesn't need to be on the composite like I just put it there, because this is tied to the data, which is in the database of HGS Investor. And this turned out to be a good call, didn't it? Here's a Kahuna, and here is a Eureka, which was not showing up on the other chart. So I just put a new chart in here for everybody. Okay, that's one thing I wanted to point out. Okay, I think that's most of the new stuff. This chart and of course this chart, both on the end of day and intraday. That's the 7A chart. I think it's the 8A on the end of day. Okay, let me look at what Peter's saying here. All securities. Okay, let's go down here. I'll bring up the chart. THC. Yeah, THC, this has been a great chart. This has been coming up. While we're talking about this, let me do something here. I'm going to update well, I don't know. I don't need to update the groups. What I do want to do, though, is I am going to do a final intraday update right now because the market's closed. And then I'll turn off this automatic updating. So I go into intraday options, manual updates, and it won't update anymore. Yeah, this has been a great chart here, and look where this one, the volume point of control turned positive on this clear back here when it was about 23 and a half, and it never really did challenge this line. Right here it did, but there was also a VPA flag on that day, and it just continues to go. And this is a heavily traded stock. 50-day moving average volumes over 2 million shares on this. So yeah, it's been doing very well. I've said it many times. I'll say it again. You want to look for your best chances of winning are looking for tight charts, and this is an example of a tight chart. Now look back here. Look at this blue line here. This tells you that there's a lot of support in this area. The red line here tells you that there is a lot of support in this area too. Right now, this represents now heavy support down here over the 44 days, heavy support here over the 22 days. So, if this would happen to break down, you should find a lot of support here. What am I doing? I'm looking to the left again. Yeah, Kevin, I'll talk about that. Okay, Sinbald. Yeah, transfer of ownership. Let's find a transfer of ownership flag here. Let me go down here into these intraday scans. See if I can find anything here. It just means that, well, I want to find one so it's easier to point out. Oh, here's one. Let me go back one. Okay, this is a transfer of ownership, an up bar closing near the high. That confirmed the return of strength. It just means that there was really heavy volume, and this is exceptionally heavy volume on this particular candle, and the stock or the close was above the midpoint of the candle, but there was either buying, in this instance it was selling. So not everybody was convinced. There was profit taking here, as you can see with this wick. Top of the wicks here, it closed right here, which is halfway above the midpoint. So it just means that there was profit taking, or it was transferring from strong hands into weaker hands. The strength was up here. Well, actually, no, that's probably a little bit confusing. These were actually weaker hands up here because they got caught. And if they held on this stock, it was fine the next day. But it's just a transfer from one to the other, if that makes sense, Kevin. Whenever you see that, you're going to see it relatively heavy volume. It's going to be somewhere in the midpoint. And let me see if I can find it on the other side. That's where there was selling into it. Let's see if we can find some buying into one. I don't know if I have a screen set up. Let's see. No, I don't have a screen set up for transfer of ownership. Let me just look at this quickly. Here's another one where there was selling. Volume was pretty heavy, as you can see down here. But they sold into it. So there was transferring from the people that bought up here, And here's another one right here. This is a good example. Here's a transfer of ownership. Sold off, buyers stepped in to bring it back up above the midpoint. Volume was above average right here. So it's transferring from one hand to the other. Makes sense? It means there was support here, but it really didn't hold the, wow, look at the price of the stock. That's why. So you have to be careful about that. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about our Skype group. If you're not a member of the Insider Club, you haven't been able to get into the group, but we've decided to try this, or I'm going to say Marilyn and Paul have. They're pretty much the originators of the room. We're going to let HGSI subscribers join the room if you want to. The only caveat is if you quit using HGSI, we're going to remove you from the room. So if you want to join us, you're welcome. You just send me an email and I'll send you the information about joining. You have to have a Skype account, and you can join us and see what we talk about. Some days are very active. Some days are not so active, but we talk about stocks, what some of us are doing. You just have to remember that what we discuss is not a recommendation to buy or sell. That's up to you. It's just like this. It's all about education. But if you have questions about HGSI and if I'm online, I'm certainly happy to answer them. And it's a good place to hang out. Another caveat is that you have to stick to HGSI and Thinkorswim subjects. We won't allow anybody in there trying to sell other products. We're not interested, okay? So if Kevin, if the wick is low and the buying comes back up above the midpoint, that's bullish. If the wick is high and it comes down to about the midpoint, that's bearish. But that's just on one candle. So you can't make too much of it, okay? Because you saw that even though there was a bearish candle on that one day on that stock I was looking at, the next day the stock took off. Okay? Yeah, we can talk about hot dogs, but I'm not interested in learning about other products. And the reason is because you don't need other products. It's that simple. In my opinion, I've bought so many software programs. I wish I had the money in my pocket. I could use it for trading rather than collecting dust on this stuff. So anyway, anything else? I've gone about an hour and 15 minutes. Do you have any questions about what I talked about? Are you more confused than ever, or is this stuff starting to come into focus? Okay, thanks, Paul. We'll be discussing this more and more as we go forward. VPOC, volume point of control, volume at price. They're both in this here. Here, this is volume at price, and of course VPA are the things I focus on. We also use pocket pivots, of course. Why? Because it's based upon price and volume. We look at support and resistance. Like I said, look to the left, see where support and resistance is, and it'll help you out. Okay, well, I guess I'll end this. I've gone an hour and 14 minutes if there are no questions. John, I'm going to let you make that filter, that transfer of ownership filter, okay? And I'll review it. Thanks, George. I'll see if I can make a transfer of ownership. Okay. I won't be here next week, but the following week, if I'm around, we'll do another Friday session. If you like these Friday sessions, I kind of like to wrap up the week. You can see the market came back. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Have a good weekend, and I'll be online on Monday.